4 coworkers I'd personally walked through their first year sat around the conference table, all with new titles glowing on the slide behind my director. My name wasn't on the slide. Their names were. "Before we wrap," my director said, smiling toward the VP at the end of the room, "I want to highlight some exciting internal promotions." I already knew what was coming. The announcement email had gone out that morning. But it hits differently when you hear it said out loud, in a room where half the people present had once DM'd you at 11:30 p.m. asking, "Hey, sorry, can you help me understand this one part again?" "First," he continued, "we're recognizing Arnav as Senior Operations Lead. He's done an incredible job ramping up on the reconciliation pipeline and has shown outstanding leadership potential." Polite claps. Arnav avoided looking at me. "Second, congratulations to Niharika, promoted to Implementation Manager for the Enterprise Accounts Pod." More claps. I'd spent 2 months sitting with Niharika every morning at 8 a.m. before anyone else arrived, walking her through the architecture diagram line by line until she could explain it from memory. Third, we're pleased to announce that Mateo is now Senior Analyst Client Reliability. Mateo, who used to ask me, "Is there a simple way to remember the difference between hard failures and soft failures?" And finally, my director said, "We're elevating Rashi to Team Manager for the Mid-Market Solutions Group." My chest got tight. Team Manager, my team. Technically not mine. On the org chart, I was still Senior Systems Specialist. But for the last 5 years, every new hire in Mid-Market Solutions had landed in a seat adjacent to mine, with my name scribbled onto their onboarding plan under shadow. "Rashi will be stepping into a formal leadership role for the group," my director added. "She's been an informal leader for some time, and this title recognizes the reality of her contributions." Polite laughter. More claps. I clapped too, because what else do you do in that moment? Argue. Stand up and say, "Actually, I've been the informal leader of this group for 7 years." You don't. You clap. You smile. You file the moment away in your mental archive labeled "Attacks on your self-respect that people will later tell you were misunderstandings." Before anyone asks, he added, "Yes, there will be more growth opportunities later this year. Patience. Your turn is coming." He said it to the whole room. But when people glanced sideways, they glanced toward me. Because that sentence had already been said to me, specifically, 4 times in the last 3 years. "Be patient, Aaron. Your turn is coming." They whispered it in one, in hallway conversations, in check-ins where they rated my performance exceeds expectations, and then tacked on some vague comment about needing more leadership visibility before they closed the document and asked if I had any fun weekend plans. I stayed late last night building that leadership visibility into the slides you're presenting right now, I always thought. But I never said it. Instead, I kept doing what I'd always done. I fixed their errors. I explained the systems again. I showed up early, stayed late, and made sure the systems we supported didn't explode in the middle of the night. And every time someone said, "Patience, your turn is coming," I nodded like I believed them. That afternoon, after the meeting, Rashi stopped by my desk. She stood there awkwardly for a moment, twisting the badge lanyard around her fingers. "Hey," she said, I know it's weird. I just wanted to say I wouldn't have gotten here without you." I looked up from my monitor. "You earned it," I said automatically. She shook her head. "I would have drowned without you," she answered quietly. "I know that. I don't know how to say that in a way that makes this less." "Don't worry about it," I cut in. "Congratulations." "It should have been you," she added, voice barely above a whisper. "Well," I said, turning back to my screen, "it is." 2 weeks later, after my 4th student officially became my manager, I stopped doing the one thing that had secretly been holding this entire team together. I stopped teaching. I didn't rage quit. I didn't send an angry email. I just quietly logged into our internal wiki, opened the folder labeled Aaron's Unofficial Guides, and deleted every how-to document I'd written over the last 7 years. Step-by-step checklists, annotated screenshots, troubleshooting trees for weird edge cases no one remembered how to handle until they happened again. Gone. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. If the company was going to pretend I was replaceable, it was time to stop making myself irreplaceable for free. From that day, I went radio silent. No more last-minute DMs answered at 11:58 p.m. No more quick sanity check on a deployment plan that I hadn't been asked to review officially. No more can you hop on for 5 minutes. Calls that turned into an hour of repair work no one logged under my name. For 3 weeks, I did my job exactly as written. Nothing more, nothing less. By the end of week 3, upper management was in a panic. But to understand why, you need to see how I got there. Because none of this started with that promotion slide. It started 8 years earlier in a cramped training room with stale coffee, flickering lights, and a whiteboard that became my second home. My name is Arun Rao. I'm 41 years old. I've never had a C-level title. I don't post thought leadership threads on social media. Nobody at conferences scans the attendee list hoping to meet me. I'm the person who sits 3 rows back in the all hands, listening for the words that will eventually become my problem. I work, used to work, for a logistics technology company called Axiom Relay. Think of it as the invisible software between warehouses, trucks, and distribution centers. When you order something at midnight and somehow it shows up at your door 2 days later, there's a decent chance a system like ours quietly made 100 decisions to route inventory, book capacity, and reconcile data between 5 different companies. My team's job was simple to describe and tedious to execute. Make sure that when those decisions happened, they didn't blow up in anyone's face. We own the order state system, an internal term for the layer that tracked every shipment, every status update, every exception. If something went wrong, if a truck didn't arrive, if a pallet disappeared, if a barcode got scanned twice, we were the people who figured out whether it was an operations problem, a data problem, a vendor problem, or one of those cursed, it's complicated problems that touched all 3. My official title was Senior Systems Specialist. Unofficially, I was the person new hires shadowed, the one product managers pulled into meetings when someone said legacy behavior, the guy people pinged with super weird question, mind if I run it by you? It wasn't glamorous, but it was work that mattered. And for a long time, I believed that would be enough. I joined Axiom when it was still small enough that the founders knew everyone's names and big enough that we had real clients who could destroy us if we messed up. At the time, the order state system was a Frankenstein monster stitched together with cron jobs, bash scripts, a queuing service nobody wanted to touch, and documentation written by someone who had clearly left in a hurry. My first week, a senior engineer slid a diagram across my desk. This is what we think happens, he said. Reality may differ. He wasn't joking. For the first 6 months, I did 2 things. I watched how things really behaved. I wrote down everything I learned like my life depended on it. I didn't have formal authority. What I had was curiosity and a high tolerance for tedium. I traced flows from the warehouse scanners through our API gateway into the event ingester, down through the state machine, and back out to client systems. I sat in on calls when things broke, not because anyone asked me to, but because I knew every incident was a free masterclass in what this system actually does. Then I started doing the one thing that later came back to bite me. I documented the hell out of it. At first, it was for myself, scribbled notes in a notebook, little diagrams on sticky notes. Then a teammate asked, "Hey, do you have that thing you drew about how partial shipments get reconciled? That actually made sense." So I cleaned it up and posted it to the internal wiki. Axiom's wiki wasn't formal. It was a graveyard of half-written specs and outdated FAQs. I created a new space and named it Order State Field Notes. That first page got maybe 3 views. Then there was an incident. Our largest e-commerce client launched a promotion that doubled order volume overnight. The system handled the load, but downstream reconciliation data got weird. Orders showed as stuck in transit when they weren't. A metrics dashboard started blinking red. SLAs were suddenly in danger. On the incident bridge, people were guessing. I was. I'd already mapped that path. I pulled up my notes, traced the hampered queue, and suggested the one thing we needed to restart and the one thing we absolutely should not touch. We fixed it in an hour. The incident lead pinged me afterward. "Can you put what you just explained into a doc?" she asked. I did. That doc got 200+ views in a day. The next week, someone pinged me, "Hey, saw your incident write-up. Any chance you could explain the retry logic for the warehouse integration? I always get confused there. I wrote another guide, step by step. What triggers retries, how many attempts, what error codes are fatal versus transient, what symptoms show up in the monitoring dashboards that one got bookmarked by half the operations team. And just like that, I became the person who writes clear guides about confusing things. It wasn't in my job description. No one asked me to do it, but it made everyone's lives easier, so I kept doing it. When Axiom started to grow faster, my writing turned into a safety net. New clients meant new edge cases. New hires meant new ways to make old mistakes. I wrote runbooks that turned "Aaron, can you fix this?" into "follow these steps. If step 3 fails, then call Aaron." I didn't think of it as making myself indispensable. I thought of it as making the team more capable. Every time one of my guides reduced an incident from 5 hours to 40 minutes, I felt a small, private satisfaction. This is what seniority is supposed to look like, I told myself. Teach, unblock, make the system and the people around you better. The first time I trained a new hire end-to-end, it felt like building a copy of myself from scratch. He was a fresh grad named Devesh, bright, eager, overwhelmed. We spent 3 months pairing on everything. At first, he would DM me every 15 minutes. Is this normal? What does this error mean? Where does this file go again? I never brushed him off. I remembered what it felt like to be thrown into a mess and told, "You're smart, you'll figure it out." Instead, I walked him through each decision, not just what to do, but why. By month 4, his messages changed. "Hey, I think I saw something like this before. Does it look like the same pattern to you?" I'd check. He was right. By his first-year review, he was one of the strongest people on the team. My director noticed. "You did a great job with Devesh," he said. "Not everyone can ramp folks that quickly." "Thanks," I replied, a little embarrassed. "You've got a knack for coaching," he added. "That's going to matter when we start building out more management layers." It was the first time anyone at Axiom hinted at the idea of me moving into a formal leadership role. That sentence planted a seed. When the next new hire came in, I raised my hand. "I'll take them," I said. The next 3 years, I did that again and again. Every time there was a new analyst or systems specialist joining our pod, they ended up beside me. I didn't ask for extra pay. I didn't ask for a different title, I just did the work. My reward supposedly would come later. It didn't happen all at once. The first time I was passed over, it almost made sense. The company announced a new team lead role for mid-market solutions. They combined 2 pods under one person. I threw my name in. So did 2 others. They picked one of the other 2, a guy named Lucas from the infrastructure side. He'd been there longer than me and had already been doing some coordination work. I was disappointed but not shocked. "Your time will come," my director told me in our next one. "I need you exactly where you are right now. You're the backbone." Being the backbone sounded flattering, until I realized it meant being the part everyone assumed would keep working no matter how much weight they piled on it. The second time it stung. They created a senior specialist band with a small bump and some leadership expectations. By then, I'd trained 3 cohorts of new hires. I owned half the docs in the system's wiki. When a client escalation came in, my director would ask, "Have you looped in Aaron?" before asking anything else. I didn't even have to apply for that promotion. I thought it was inevitable. They gave it to a guy from another team who'd been at Axiom about as long as I had, but who had more visibility with the VP because they sat on the same side of the floor. "Be patient," my director said. "You're on the list for the next cycle. Sometimes timing just doesn't line up." "Okay," I said. I believed him because I still wanted to. The third time, it stopped being about timing. We had an opening for manager workflow systems. This was it. The job description read like my current responsibilities plus the coaching I was already doing informally. I updated my internal profile. I interviewed. I walked through how I'd built the training plan, how I'd structured the wiki, how I designed the runbooks. They nodded. They asked about difficult conversations. I told them about the time I had to tell a client their internal process was breaking our SLA, not the other way around. They seemed impressed. 2 weeks later, an announcement went out. "Please join us in congratulating Rashi on her promotion to Manager Workflow Systems." The same Rashi I'd trained 18 months earlier. The same one who still occasionally pinged me, "Hey, when XYZ happens, is that expected?" My director called me 30 minutes before the email went out. "I wanted you to hear it from me," he said. "Okay," I replied. "This was not an easy decision," he started. "You and Rashi both had strong cases." "Sure," I said. "In the end," he continued, "leadership wanted to bet on someone with a different energy. You're incredibly solid, she's more visible, she pushes, she asks for things." "You're saying I don't ask for things," I said. "I'm saying you tend to just handle things," he replied. "You're so reliable that sometimes it's easy to forget how much you're carrying." He meant it as a compliment. It was. "Be patient," he added. "Your turn is coming." It was the third time I'd heard the exact same sentence in as many years. I went home that night and sat at the dining table after everyone else had gone to bed, staring at my laptop with the wiki open. There was a page titled Onboarding Mid-Market Team. I'd written it 3 years earlier. It had grown into a hub. From that page, you could get to how to trace an order through all systems, common failure patterns and what they actually mean, when to escalate to engineering and when to fix it yourself, what to say to clients when they're panicking. Most of those pages had last updated dates within the last 6 months. Most of them had been authored or heavily edited by me. I clicked into one at random, step-by-step screenshots, notes in plain language, a little joke at the end to keep people from feeling stupid. I scrolled down to the view counter. It had been opened 453 times. I thought about the people I'd trained, the promotions, the "You're a rock, Aaron," the "We couldn't do this without you," the "We need you right where you are." I thought about the fact that for the past 3 cycles, my exceeds expectations evaluations came with a line item that said, "No promotion at this time. Continue to exhibit leadership." Leadership that apparently meant, carry everyone else until they're high enough that they can look down and tell you to be patient. That night, for the first time, a thought formed that I'd always pushed away before. What if my thoroughness was the reason I was stuck? What if by making things so smooth, so predictable, so safe, I'd removed every visible sign of how much skill it took to keep it that way? That's when the idea of the guide stopped feeling like a gift and started feeling like a leash. The final straw wasn't a big incident. It was a small, stupid one. One of the junior analysts, a guy named Harun, pinged me at 5:45 p.m. on a Friday. "Hey Aaron, sorry, quick question. Is it okay if I just rerun the close day job? It looks stuck." I asked, "Did you check the preconditions?" "Which ones?" he replied. I linked the runbook. 5 minutes later, he wrote, "Oh, I see. Sorry, I didn't think to look there first." I stared at the message. He'd been here 7 months. He'd been trained using my guides. He knew the runbook existed. But it was still easier to DM me first. I answered his question anyway. We fixed the minor issue. The system behaved. No one above us ever knew there'd been a potential problem. That's when I realized the pattern wasn't going to change on its own. I was training people well enough that the system never exposed how fragile it was without me. I was insulating leadership from seeing how often decisions hinged on my quiet intervention. Promotions weren't coming because, from their perspective, nothing was on fire. Why would you promote the guy whose absence you've never had to feel? So when the 4th coworker I'd trained got a promotion that leapfrogged mine, I made a decision. I wasn't going to blow anything up. I wasn't going to sabotage. But I was done being the invisible guardrail. The day I deleted the guides, it was a simple sequence of clicks. I'd spent the weekend thinking through the ethics of it. Was it wrong to remove documentation that clearly helped the team? I came back to one point. All of those guides had been created voluntarily. They were not part of my formal role. They'd never been considered in my promotion cases, except as nice to have. I had written them on top of my actual responsibilities, not instead of them. They'd become expected but never acknowledged. So I opened the wiki, navigated to order state field notes, and reread the warning banner. Deleting a page will remove it for all users. This action cannot be undone. I hovered for a long time, then I clicked. One by one, not in a blind purge. I saved copies for myself locally under a folder labeled Experience. Because the knowledge was mine. The versions on the wiki were gifts I'd given to a group that had decided the gift was the reason I didn't deserve more. When I was done, the space was empty. No flashy message went out. No Aaron deleted X pages broadcast. The wiki just became a little quieter, like a library where certain shelves now led to 404 pages. Then I changed my behavior. I answered only the questions that actually belonged to my job. If someone pinged me with, "Hey, quick conceptual question," I started responding with, "Did you check the documentation?" With a link to the generic internal docs, not my old guides. If they said, "I liked yours better," I answered, "Those were unofficial and I've retired them." If someone tried, "Can you just jump on a quick call?" I checked the incident severity first. If it wasn't a real incident, I pointed them at their own training materials. I stopped signing onto the bridge when I wasn't on call. I stopped proofreading other people's emails to clients. I stopped letting "I don't want them to struggle" override "it's okay for grown adults to figure things out." It took about 4 days before someone noticed the wiki. "Hey," Mateo said in a group chat, "did the order state docs move?" "Which ones?" Rashi asked. "The detailed ones Aaron wrote. I just get errors." "Must be a permissions thing," someone else replied. "I'll ask it." It looked. There was nothing to restore. By the end of the week, there was a quiet undercurrent of annoyance. Everything takes longer now. I swear there used to be a doc for this. Why doesn't anyone know the answer to this without asking Aaron? I didn't react. I did my tickets. I handled the shifts I was responsible for. When something was in my queue, it got done on time, accurately, but nothing more. No invisible work. No above and beyond that they couldn't be bothered to spell out in a promotion case. The cracks started small. A mistagged status here. A miscommunicated incident there. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to make the dashboards look noisier. The moment it turned into a real problem was week 3. Our biggest mid-market client, a regional retailer we'd grown with from their first warehouse to their 5th, had a sudden spike in lost order tickets. From their perspective, orders were disappearing. From ours, nothing obvious was wrong. No red lights. No CPU spikes. Just a slow, steady increase in "Where is my order?" messages trickling in through customer support. In the old days being a month earlier, a junior would have pinged me. "Hey, weird pattern, client X has lots of soft stuck orders. Does that ring a bell?" I would have thought, "Oh yes, that edge case where their nightly inventory sync collides with our status ingest and we get a mismatch." I'd have pulled up my guide titled, "When Orders Are Stuck But Not Really." I'd have followed the steps, confirmed the mismatch, called their tech lead, and fixed it before anyone above mid-level ever knew. This time, nobody pinged me. They went to the wiki, found nothing, asked each other, guessed. By the time it hit my radar, it wasn't a few tickets, it was several hundred. And our VP of Customer Success, who rarely showed up in our internal channels, had posted, "Can someone explain why one of our highest-paying clients has a 7-day backlog of unresolved shipment state issues?" Rashi tagged me. "At Aaron, do you have context on this?" I stared at the screen. I did have context. I'd written it down a month ago. "I've seen something similar before," I replied. "But I'd need to dig into logs. Do we have an incident opened? Whose lead?" Silence. I think Haram was looking into it," someone said. I checked the incident queue. There was an open incident, but it had been bouncing between investigating and need more info for 5 days. Nobody had assembled the pattern. Nobody had connected. The timing of the client synced the subtle KPI shifts in our dashboard, the code path that only triggered when they ran a very specific promotion in the bridge call that followed. You could feel the tone. Not panic yet. Strain. People grasping at explanations. I joined as optional, listened, waited. "Aaron, you've been quiet," the incident lead finally said. "Any thoughts?" "I think this matches the pattern I documented after the September promotion run," I said. "It's probably the same root cause, we just don't have that right up anymore." You could almost hear the realization. Oh right, that doc. The fix itself wasn't complicated. What made it ugly was the delay. Their CFO had already escalated to our sales VP. Our CEO had already been briefed with the words "recurring pattern" and "unacceptable." We fixed in hours what we could have fixed in 45 minutes, but by then, the damage wasn't technical. It was reputational. A week later, according to a friend in sales, the client asked an uncomfortably simple question in their quarterly review. "Is Aaron still with your company?" When they heard the answer was yes, the follow-up was sharper. Then why does it feel like nobody knows what he knows anymore? That's when upper management went from mildly annoyed to genuinely concerned. Because now it wasn't just internal productivity. It was client perception. And in our world, perception of competence is half the product. Suddenly, the pattern of events looked different from their vantage point. 4 people I'd trained had grown quickly. My name was on most of the meaningful internal docs. My quiet availability had kept a whole class of issues from ever rising. And in the first month after they promoted the 4th one over me, the internal noise shot up. They didn't connect everything correctly. They didn't know about the wiki deletions. They didn't see the dozens of unlogged Aaron, can you just tasks disappear. What they saw was metrics getting worse, escalations reaching higher. My name appearing in Slack more often, but now always tied to, can you help us reconstruct what you used to have written somewhere? That's when my director called me into a one with a subject line I'd never seen before. Let's talk about scope. He looked tired. That was new. For years, he'd had the slightly smug calm of someone whose team consistently outperformed without him having to explain why to his peers. Now he had folders open on his desk, printouts, highlight marks. First off, he started, I want to acknowledge something. The last few weeks have exposed some gaps. Gap sounds right, I said. He exhaled. I need to ask you something bluntly, he said. Did you pull your docs? Yes, I said. He blinked. I thought you'd deny it, he said. People said the space was empty. It said nothing was archived. It had to be someone with rights. It was me, I replied. I wrote them. I decided to retire them. Why? He asked. I could have gone for the jugular. I could have said, because you promoted 4 people I trained ahead of me while telling me to be patient. I didn't, not yet. Instead, I said, because the company decided that the extra work I was doing wasn't worth recognizing, so I stopped doing the extra work. He rubbed his forehead. You know you've put us in a difficult position, he said. You were a pillar. A pillar you never intended to move, I answered, only to lean on. That's not fair, he said reflexively. It's accurate, I replied calmly. We sat in silence for a moment. Look, he said, I'll be honest. We screwed up the optics on the last promotion cycle. The optics, I repeated. You should have been in that mix, he said, at minimum. At minimum, I echoed. He looked genuinely uncomfortable. I can't fix the past, he said, but I can ask what it would take to move forward. Depends, I said. Are you asking what it would take for me to start doing free training and documentation again? Or are you asking what it would take for me to believe this company sees me as more than an endlessly patient tutor? He hesitated. Both, he answered. Then here's the problem, I replied. Those might be 2 different answers. The next 3 weeks were messy, not in the sense of screaming matches, in the sense of an organization trying to recalibrate without admitting what had actually gone wrong. My director floated the idea of a principal specialist role. No direct reports, but an explicit recognition that certain people were pillars. He suggested we co-design it. He hinted that my name would be on the first instance of that role. I asked a simple question. Would that role have existed if things hadn't gotten messy? He admitted, probably not. Then you're not designing a role because you see a new opportunity, I said. You're designing one because the absence of what I did for free finally hurt. Is that bad? He asked. It's honest, I replied, but we should call it what it is. Meanwhile, upstairs, the panic was less philosophical. Upper management had noticed 2 graphs colliding, incident resolution times trending up, customer satisfaction scores trending down. They convened a war room to figure out why. People came in with theories, more junior hires, system complexity, increased client demands. Someone from customer success, maybe the VP, maybe a director, asked, what's changed recently in mid-market ops? They used to be the steadiest group. Silence. Then my director said something that, depending on your point of view, was either finally honest or a little late. We broke our teacher, he said, and now we're finding out how much of the curriculum lived in his head. They called me into a meeting, not just my director, the VP over him, someone from HR, someone from learning and development. The VP opened with the kind of tone usually reserved for clients. Aaron, he said, I've been reviewing your history here. You've had consistent top ratings. Your name comes up over and over when people talk about onboarding, training, and system understanding. I do my best, I said. More than your best, he replied. You've been doing informal leadership work for years. That's what I've been told, I answered. Right before, be patient. He winced. I'm not going to pretend we handled that well, he said. We should have promoted you earlier. And, I asked, and we're now paying the price for that oversight, he said. We're seeing the impact of you scaling back. We'd like to fix it. Because it hurts the business, I said. Yes, he replied, not sugarcoating it. Not because you suddenly respect what I'd been doing, I added. I think those are related, he said carefully. Sometimes it takes losing a function to see how vital it was. That's the problem, I said. You only see the value when it's missing, but you don't design your systems, your promotions, or your org chart around that value until there's a fire. We're here now, he said. Fire and all, what would it take to keep you, and to get your expertise back into the organization in a way that doesn't depend on late-night DMs? I didn't answer right away. I've been thinking about that question for weeks. Part of me wanted to say, you can't, I'm done. Another part of me, the part that had stayed at Axiom all these years, wanted a reason to believe that staying wouldn't mean being a doormat again. Okay, I said finally. Here's what it would take. I laid it out in 3 points. Title and level in line with the work I was actually doing, something that recognized that I wasn't just senior, I was an internal expert. Time allocation explicitly carved out in my role for training and documentation, with those outputs measured, not treated as invisible extras. A structural change in how new leaders were developed, so that coaching didn't become a black box where my efforts created people who then leapfrogged me without any formal acknowledgement. And if we can't do that, he asked, then we're just asking me to patch the dam again with my bare hands, I said. And I'm out of hands. Here's the thing they don't tell you in stories like this. Sometimes they actually listen. Not because they've become better people overnight, because the alternative is worse. 2 weeks later, they came back with a proposal. New role, Principal Systems Architect Order State. Level, equivalent to a manager with comparable pay and bonus potential. Scope, 50% direct system work, 50% training, documentation, and cross-team consultations. They also showed me a draft of a new performance review section for anyone in leadership. Who developed you? Who made it possible for you to succeed? My name already showed up in those answers informally. Now it would have a place to be written down. Is this enough? My director asked in our next 1-1. It's a start, I said. Will you bring the guides back? He asked carefully. No, I said. He blinked. But that was some of your best work, he said. I'll write new ones, I answered. Under the new role, with ownership and expectations that match. Those old ones were written by someone who didn't know how to ask for what he deserved. He nodded slowly. Fair, he said. So why am I telling you all this? Not to say, look at me, I played hardball and won. Because this wasn't a clean victory. It was messy, stressful, and there were days I questioned whether I was burning bridges I'd spent years building. I'm telling you because if you see yourself in any part of this, if you're the person people come to with one more quick question, the one who onboards every new hire, the one whose standards everyone quietly relies on, then you need to understand something most companies will never say out loud. If you don't define the value of your extra work, they will treat it as free. If you don't decide where your job ends and their expectations begin, they will assume your job has no edges. If you keep being the person who just handles it, they will keep giving you more to handle until you either break or disappear. The educational part, if there is one, is this. You don't have to delete your docs, go radio silent, make everything hurt to be seen. But you do have to inventory what you actually do beyond your job description. Decide which of those things you're okay doing for free and which you are. Start saying no, or at least, that's not in my role as currently scoped, before resentment is the only thing speaking. When people tell you, patience, your turn is coming, ask, what does that mean exactly? If they can't answer in concrete terms, title, level, timeline, criteria, then what they're saying isn't a plan. It's a sedative. Your expertise, your teaching, your documents, your late-night answers, they're all real value. You're allowed to ask for that value to show up somewhere other than in someone else's promotion announcement. 3 weeks after I stopped giving that value away for free, the cracks became visible. 3 months after that, the company reshaped itself slightly around reality instead of comfort. And for the first time in 8 years, I walked into work not as the guy who knows everything but isn't really leadership material yet, but as the person whose job it was to make sure the knowledge I carried was treated like what it actually was, an asset, not a personality trait. If you're the one quietly carrying people through their first year, through their mistakes, through their imposter syndrome, learn from my mistake earlier than I did. Don't wait until your fourth student becomes your manager to realize you've been playing on hard mode with no scorekeeping. Start now. Write down what you do, decide what it's worth, and the next time someone says, "Patience, your turn is coming," look them in the eye and ask, "When?"